I had to go through
My mouth is so dry. I think it's we've got the stream now all set up because we're running a little late for Matt. It looks like we're just working. Okay. It's not sure what I'm doing. Yes. Yes. Where's the source of the audio? You're welcome. Thanks for question. Billy's the tech guy. Okay. Billy, when I present, where's the source of the audio from the live stream?
It's just
coming off. Okay. So it's just talk loud?
Yeah, project your voice.
Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, yeah.
But definitely we don't
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we will call this back. We're out of executive session. We're entering the public session of the meeting, and I'm calling this meeting back into session. And we are going to begin with a brief introduction of the staff members, including we have some newer staff members with us. As you can imagine, most of them are working, but you will recognize Jennifer and Billy here, who will be facilitating throughout the public meeting. We have Rod, our journalist on call, who will be giving a journalist on call report, and we also have Lou, our still relatively new Quill editor. So, congratulate him on his new, I think, your 110-year anniversary issue. And we have several new staff members who could not be here, including Ashlyn and Zoe, who had to work. They're new communications interns. And if you do, you've got your registration bags here in envelopes. So if you do step by, Reg, you should say hello to Kathy. She's our new full-time accountant. So, welcome to the staff. Now we do want to move on to the public comment period, beginning with that today. And as those of you who've been here before know, you can just, Erwin, I think we'll probably be going to your end of the table. I don't know if you want to move maybe over to the end so the public comment person can come sit there. Yeah, that's perfect.
Hey, Alex?
Yes. Oh, is this Deb?
Alex? Before you get too far along, hi, Alex.
Yes?
Hello, this is Deb.
Hi,
I've
Deb.
been on the phone. at the end of the executive session, so I'm here now.
Oh, yes, oh, no, we do hear, I'm sorry, we knew you were there, sorry, Deb. Yes, we also, I should mention for the benefit of those in the room who were not in the executive session, we have two board members on the phone, Jeff South and Deb Kroll, and I believe with the board members in the room, we have 100% attendance with those two, yes. So, the board is all here.
Did you also, before, in case people leave after public comment, want to mention the deadline for the resolutions?
Oh, yes, that's a good point. Let's do that before we move on. Yes, the deadline for the resolution, this is Michael Savino, the Resolutions Committee Chair this year. If you've not yet submitted or started working with him on a resolution, the deadline is, you said at 10 a.m. tomorrow. Yeah, very important.
Send them right to me or see me, I'll be around and we can talk about how to submit that. But 10 a.m. tomorrow, we can look into that, we can get everything printed into delegates by Saturday morning.
Yes, that's very important. And they can find your email on the website.
Yeah.
They don't have it. Yeah, on the board page. Okay. With that, I think that was the only other piece of business before public comment. Aggie, are you moving up for public comment? Because that's the space we're using for the public comment. We're on the end of the table. You can move around to the side of the table. Okay. No, I just. Okay. Okay, with that, we'll begin the public comment period. If anyone would like to step forward. Oh. And for the benefit of Patty, just reminded me that, given that we are running late, that we were gonna set a 3-minute time limit on comments. However, if people feel they have more to say, and if everyone else who wants to speak during the public comment period is coming, can come for a second time, at some point we will have to cut it off because we do have to get on with the agenda. I think we have that 20 minutes from now, but we'll see how that goes. So given that we want to allow everyone to speak, we will do the 3-minute time limit. Yeah, that's cool. Yes.
Hi there, I'm Michael Drudge, and I'm president of the San Antonio Pro Chapter. So I wanted to welcome everybody to our city. I hope you're having a good time and enjoying yourself while you're here. And I don't know if this is the right forum, but could you give us an update on the executive director search and where that stands, when that might be completed? Thank you. That's all I have to say.
That is still very preliminary, and I mean, I can say, do you want to say special? Okay, yeah, we actually are going to be talking about that in the, is that going to be?
It's in the presentation.
Yeah.
Public.
We actually, the only question is if people are staying, if you're staying to the end of the meeting, we actually have that as part of the public presentation, but is anyone in the public comment period not planning to stay for the meeting?
Okay, we can, I just wasn't quite sure.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a longer, I mean,
Right, we don't have to go into detail, but just answer the question about where we're at. Right, it's easy. Now,
okay. Would you like to say something on that? Or Nikki?
Could you possibly tell where we are on the time?
Yeah, that's what we're discussing, who will answer the question. Nikki, would you like to answer that question? As the chair.
Well, we're very encouraged. We're talking to some candidates. We're hoping that we can bring to the board some options in the next couple of months. Our bottom line goal is to maybe even be able to onboard someone by December if possible. So we're definitely moving forward.
That clarifies what I wanted to do.
Super. Very good. And again, we'll be talking about this more during the presentation. Okay, public comment. The next person for the public comment period, would anyone like to step forward? No, I don't have eyes in the back of my head, sorry.
No worries.
Do you want to move to the front of the room, or do you want to, you can address
Wherever I
from
should
there?
sit, doesn't
Okay, that's
matter to
fine.
I just wanted to,
Hi, I'm Jonathan Make. It's great to be here. I think everyone has got an invitation for the little informal chit-chatting get-together we're having at 7 p.m. tonight on the second floor. Hope to see any staff members, any board members, and any other members who want to come, and that's it. So, thank you.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, hi there, I'm Stephanie Lucine, I'm chapter, president of the Greater LA chapter. And I just wanted to call your attention, if you weren't aware, on September 3rd, our chapter issued a statement in which we were calling for the directors for sponsorship money provided by Fox, and that we were standing in allegiance with capitalism. We realized that Fox is a huge player in the business, and we're not necessarily saying don't invite Fox ever again, but we felt like we could not be silent, especially with the way their coverage has in the rhetoric as with not just anti-immigrant, but Muslim and other groups as well. So I just wanted to call your attention that we've got statement and that we're open to hearing other ideas as well. And thank you.
Thank you. Okay, would anyone else like to speak during the public comment period? Going once, going twice? Okay. Okay. We'll move along then. And as we said, some of these issues we will be talking about in the presentation further. My report is in the packet. It is a top level view of the accomplishment of the volunteers and the staff this year. Obviously, it's been an extraordinary year with the turnover and all that, but I wanted to give everyone their due. So hopefully the board members have seen the report. Are there any questions about the report? Oh, I'm sorry, someone, Deb, that might be you. We're getting backbeat. Can you put it on mute when you're not speaking? That's text her. Yeah, just text her, because she may not know it's not on. Any questions about the report? Okay. Moving along. Erwin, I call on the president of the foundation for the foundational president report. Any questions about Erwin's report? Okay, we are making up for lost time in a hurry. Okay, next is Rod Hicks, our journalist on call, who has a very interesting report in the packet. He's been busy this year.
Thank you, Alex. The thing that I really wanted to tell you about is the CAST project that we did. We wrapped it up on July 16th. This is the session that we opened to the public. And we had 200 people come out. Just as a reminder, most of these sessions were just limited to the 36 people who were like the initial participants, and we had conversations with them. But we just thought it would be good to open this one up. And the reason we did is that people who were coming were national journalists. And we had some news executives or newsroom managers from the Wall Street Journal, the Associated Press, the Washington Post, and BuzzFeed News. And it was a good conversation that people had. We also were represented by SBJ. I was happy to see Alex and Erwin and Lou there in attendance as well. And it was a really good, and there's it is online. There's a link to that session online. So after 6 months of this, I think I'll have a report on the project on Saturday, but really the strength of this is the comments that we heard from the people. Just listening to what they saw as concern and to listen to them speak about it passionately. And I just think that there's a lot that we can learn from what the people who we produce news for are saying about what we're doing in areas that they believe we should have been. Happy to take any questions if there are any.
In our meeting in April, Rod, we talked a little bit about the research methods and things like that, and possibly converting this over into classroom projects. I know Patty was interested, I was interested in that as well. What do you see coming out of, the Casper session now, of us being able to take and repurpose some of this into either classroom lessons or even research projects that other entities can do on a local level?
I think that there is, that we can do some of that. We just have to put together a curriculum. And that was something that I was already thinking about. But that's something that I'm going to try to do to see what we can do in terms of developing curriculum. I'm already doing that in conversations with other organizations who already do that.
Every J school in the country is trying to find ways to teach that. Right. Interesting is very, I think it's really market put out there and get our names good stuff.
No, I had a similar question to Mike, but I would also point out that I know our ethics committee just created a presentation that they're going to get out this. Maybe there's some overlap with whatever presentation or curriculum you're putting together. Be sure to hear those. Trail ethics was a big thing that they talked about. So there might be a lot of overlap between these areas. We aren't just keep duplicating things and recreating things.
And also the education committee, Press for Education, although that is aimed at a K through 12 audience. I mean, there's definitely some synergies.
Yeah, there's a lot of here I know schools, at least in my area, but
Right. I mean, maybe they were moving towards a more unified presentation, perhaps a different, one for kids, and slight adjustments for college. So I do want to say it was an honor. I know Erwin, I felt it was an honor to attend. Some brief opening remarks. Of course, Lou was there covering it, so I'm very thank you for including us in that.
Sure.
Were there any other questions?
I'm sure. Rod, you have next steps mapped out?
No, I don't have that yet, but that's one of the next things that I'm doing. I think that it will deal with digging a little deeper into news literacy, because one of the things that became clear, I mean, we knew this, I guess, is that there is a big misunderstanding about people about what they're receiving and whether it's really news. And the temptation is just to call it fake news when it's not news at all.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Rod. Next, we have the approval of the minutes, and we have an interesting situation here because typically the executive committee votes on the executive committee minutes. However, with the board restructuring next year, the executive committee is going away. So what we will do is first the full board will vote on the full board minutes, and then those members of the executive committee only will vote on their minutes. And that will be the last action really of the executive committee. So, so we'll begin with the June 1st full board meeting. Do we have a motion to approve these minutes? I actually heard, I saw your hand, I actually heard it at first, so I'll make it the first, but you want to be the second? Okay. Okay, and
There's a mention at the end of page 28 of the minutes that there was a motion, a second, and then two people voted no. But it doesn't actually say that it passed, that the rest voted yes.
Pages up for the minutes.
Page 28, maybe it's page 29.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's right above public comment. I made the motion, Sue seconded it. It didn't say that the motion passed. Good point.
Yeah.
Good catch, Andy.
Well, Sean's getting there, 20.
It's now 29.
Right before the second public comment.
Right, the third line up from public comments.
So it shows.
What's your suggestion? Okay.
It says who voted no and who abstained, presumably.
Right, so
Voted
between,
no and
so,
abstained, everyone else voted
right,
for.
so
Yeah.
after motion Bartlett, second, Sue Cogan Capson, motion.
Motion passed.
Passed.
Tarquinio.
It's a
Tarquinio.
Tarquinio,
Exactly.
no Walker
Right,
abstained.
so just need, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I think we just had to put it on who abstained and just assumed the other people and voted the other way. Yeah.
Okay.
So do you want to read back up that change?
Yeah, so
Mr.
with, so the
Secretary?
change would say, on the top of page 29, motion Bartlett, second, Coven Katzif, motion passed with Tarquinio and Newberry voting no.
Walker abstained.
Walker.
Any other amendments, questions, corrections to these minutes? Okay. With that correction, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? I'm sorry, I heard, oh, that was on the phone, that was a delayed one, yeah. Any nays? Any abstentions? Okay, minutes are approved. Now moving along to the 2 executive session, and if there's no objections in the interest of
There
time,
is
can we
one.
take them
I
together?
have, yeah, I got a correction, which I shared with
Okay,
Jennifer.
Caroline.
On page 32, on the line where I'm speaking, in the second line, it should say including a new transparency policy, the word new is missing.
This is on page 32.
Correct. And with that change, I need approval.
Okay, I'm not seeing the change. Which paragraph is that in?
Um,
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, just look for the.
Board transparency is reviewing or including a new. Right, okay, that makes sense.
You move in approval
I
of
move
both.
in approval, yeah. on the
Of
approval of
both executive.
Yes, on the approval of those.
Okay. Do we have a second? Oh, and this, oh wait, I'm sorry. To be clear, once again, these are only the 6 executive committee members who are voting now. And we're sitting in front of her. Okay, so Sue seconds. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Aye. Oh, no, Deb, you're not voting on this one, sorry. Any nays and abstentions, okay. Motion is approved. There's always a good one. Okay, so we have approved all of the meeting minutes for the year. Today, which is good. Moving along to the chat report, and Caroline is working the registration desk, so she could not be here, and Jennifer is going to give us the chapter.
Yes, if I can find it, hang on.
Yes. Yeah, we did.
Okay, so you'll see that there are 3 chapters seeking to be chartered. Louisiana State University Campus Chapter in Region 12, Northeastern Illinois University Campus Chapter in Region 5, Wyoming Pro Chapter is seeking to be stated in Region 5. The only chapter we have to activate right now is, I just lost my place, is the Greater Charlotte Pro. It officially closed and received the email July 3rd. Caroline wanted to note that there are close to 31 chapters that failed to submit annual reports for the last 3 consecutive years. So at this time, she's working with those chapters during a grace period that they're given to bring everything back into good standing. And most of these chapters are campus chapters, so she adjusted that grace period to give them time to get back into school and get settled and get everything in order. So a more extensive list of She said the process, I don't know, if she made of the actual chapters, will be provided at the next board meeting, and we'll probably has to take action on that.
By next board meeting, you mean the person meeting in April?
Yeah.
Okay, right. Very good. So are you asking, I'm sorry, oh, yes, Lauren.
I just wanted to ask, that I know Caroline said her, but it's not going to be shared with her, that she reach out to the regional coordinators, the regions of those chapters, and partner with them because they might be able to help. Because the goal is to provide as many chapters as possible.
And if I could just add on top of that, for the universities, programs have evolved, and there are inherent problems for SPJ in that. They will likely have to reach out to administrative staff, because the students who may be listed may be long gone.
Yeah.
Well, also, we will also have a new executive director before this day, that day. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, did you see, Andy, you have a hand up? Yes. Andy.
Yeah, Jennifer responded to putting on the spot. Do you know anything more about the chapters and activate section of the
I do not, I'm sorry.
I was hoping Caroline would be here, so this last week, what closed email received meant. Because at first that I heard that, I was reading this. I know Caroline has probably not been around since the last time we went through this process, but it traditionally has been after the annual reports are compiled. When the coordinator would talk to the regional directors, just do a brief rundown. Here's where we stand. This chapter didn't turn the report, this one did. What do you think? We have a brief chat. Yes, it's been an activity last year or two, but let's give it another year. The regional director would have contact with a chapter or more recent contacts, and so the two people working together could share ideas and figure out what we were to do. I'm pretty sure that Road Chapter has been inactive for several years. It was a very good chapter, and then it wasn't, but the movement to reinstate it all fell upon the founder of the chapter, who was very interested in restarting it, had great ideas, and then I lost track of him, and then I found out God. I fear that it's one of those situations where one person was either keeping it going or trying to keep it going, and there's not enough support, but I have not done enough talking with other people to see if there's support for that chapter. So I know that's a long-winded answer. I'm not necessarily opposed, but I would like to know what that email was. If somebody turned in money, for example.
Well, when we deactivate a chapter, we can reactivate it. I mean, often it's just a problem with someone either becoming busy or in this case dying, and just the key person who's the volunteer driving that is no longer there. We can still reactivate it. And I don't know, Jennifer, if you can talk about that process. This is actually Caroline's job, but it's pretty much like activating a chapter. It doesn't necessarily, but don't lose the knowledge that they reactivate. Yes,
So
Laura.
how about, because that could be a very cumbersome process, can we table this and then the new board on Sunday can take it up get information from Caroline in the meantime? Would that be acceptable, Patty?
Can we activate, can we charter the chapter?
Why, I would table this, if we need information and there's a possibility of the chapter continuing.
We can take
I
this
don't
up
want
again,
us to-
but what exactly are we tabling? This is a memo.
Well, we do need to, but I'm sorry.
Yeah, we have to-
We're voting on whether or not to make it an
Well, is there any controversy in voting to charter these 3 chapters, which are excellent? I mean, Louisiana, Northeastern, Hawaii. Well, there's no controversy in
No,
charter.
just
the
tabling
activate.
the inactivate.
Okay, then that's good. And then Karen, but just so that we have this under here. So, okay, so for now, we will table the deactivation of Greater Charlotte. But get a motion to charter these 3 new chapters at Louisiana State University campus, Northeastern Illinois campus, and Wyoming Pro.
I'll move with these. One of them's my home chapter that I grew up in.
Oh, okay, so we have
I just
Fred,
wait
did
to
you
see them
second?
back and forth.
Okay, did you second? Okay, got it, you done that. I think we've had discussion, but any further discussion on these? Okay.
I would like to just learn Wyoming, what particular steps are taken to revive that chapter, what our regional coordinator is, gets credit for that, or Carolyn gets credit for it. I don't know much about what happened there. It went quiet and it's now reinstated, so.
I'm curious if the CASPA project had something to do with inspiring people. Did you hear anything about this, Ron?
Well, I talked to the person who had been president,
Yeah.
and in fact, I'm planning to invite her
Okay.
to come back to Casper. I'm gonna make one last trip, but I don't recall any efforts, but it could have had some impact.
But it did, I mean, it was a chapter and now it's being reinstated, so it could have generated some interest, so that's a nice. Okay, if there's no further discussion, we can
So
proceed to a
just
vote.
one more step on that. I mean, I moved back to Baton Rouge a year or 14 months ago and found that the LSU chapter had disbanded and bullied my alma mater and said, I'm not the chapter anymore. They're back.
So,
That's all this is at.
yes, the personal touch, which is what, there you go, and I suspect that the CASPA project has some things there. Okay. So we can proceed to a vote then. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Any nays? Any abstentions? Okay, these 3 chapters shall be chartered, and we'll take up the inactivation. We'll have to make sure that Carolyn makes exactly the charge. So why don't you reach out to her? Okay.
Patty, I can just ask her too, but it's probably very simple.
Okay, moving along. There are several National Committee or Task Force reports in the packet that are not presenting here today, but hopefully you've had a chance to read them. Some of the authors are here, obviously some people are still flying in. I'll read those out, and as I read them, if you are in the room, raise your hand for the benefit of the public in case they don't know you. And perhaps at the end, we can find out if there are any specific questions related to these. So, the committee reports in the packet are from Awards and Honors, Andy Schatz. Diversity, Rebecca Aguilar. She could not be here because she's moderating something today. But we actually have the vice chair. I'm sorry, as a member of our board, Yvette. So we have questions there for her. Ethics, Lynn Walsh. Jen J, Tess Fox. Journalism Education, Becky Talent and Letitia Steffen. Legal Defense Fund, Hagid Lamore. Hagid, where are you? I saw it there. Membership, Colin DeVries. He's still traveling, I don't know. Freelance, Hillary Niles. International L2C of Dan Giski. 110th anniversary of Ed Walker. And then there's also a report from Sunny about the Accrediting Council of Education, Journalism, and Communications. Now, not everyone is here, but were there any questions from the board on any of these reports? Okay. Okay, and with that, we are right on still to the Board Policy Review Task Force report. This was a mammoth undertaking that started really at the beginning of the year, day 1. They've done a complete review of all of our existing policies and recommended some new policies. And at the end of this, we want to get them, prominently displayed on the website. So I will hand that over to Matt Ball.
Yeah, thank you. So this was a lot of work undertaken by a task force of myself, Lauren Butler, Andy Schatz, Catherine Jones, and Bill McCloskey. And what we did was we looked at 20 years of policies for the SBJ board and tried to decide which ones to keep, to revise. In some cases, we recommended repealing them for redundancies. Basically, this started, most of the changes I would characterize as minor, related to 3 things. One is the name change for the SBJ Foundation. One is the name change and the shift from regional directors to regional coordinators. And then a third thing is the elimination of our executive committee with the board reduction. So those three things, we had to go in and change the language for most of the policies. So as you'll see, much of the changes had to do with that. There are some larger suggestions and changes, and so what my proposal will be after I briefly summarize for those in the room the larger changes, is that we kind of split this vote into two votes. One is the bulk of this would create a policy document for the proposals that I can kind of call out, and then at the end, handle some of the bigger ones separately, like a new transparency policy, which is super important, a new awards policy, which is necessitated because of the executive committee, which did a lot of the heavy lifting on that and moved on. The conflict of interest policy, which is obviously something we all care about. And then talking to Alex earlier, the ED evaluation and hiring policy applied to us and the foundation board. So any
Hiring and
changes.
evaluation.
Correct, two separate policies apply to both boards, and so any changes that we make would require changes by the foundation. Those changes are pretty cosmetic in nature, mostly revolving around that we need to change SDX Foundation to SBJ Foundation. But because it requires two votes, I'm going to suggest we pull those out. But just for benefit of the room, the larger suggestions are, as I said, a new awards and transparency policies, a more concise, streamlined conflict of interest policy, and within some of these changes, discussions we might want to have, there was a 5-year term limit for national committee chairs, which, and the task force members who are here can discuss that if they want. We recommend getting rid of that because it seemed arbitrary. And within the campaign guidelines, there is an issue where in the past, as we know from some of the buttons on people's shirts today, board members can't endorse in elections. Our proposal with a smaller board is that we get rid of that proviso. So that kind of tees it up. Obviously, you guys have seen the report, which is 3 sections. One is kind of an overview, which I just gave you a short echo. The other is the proposals as they would look. And then the third is the existing proposals, so you have a comparison point to see what has changed. So I guess with that is my proposal, and to open up the discussion, is that we peel off those and do 2 separate votes. But Sue also had some changes.
3 pages.
Yeah,
So
some of which are incorporated,
some are,
some of
but,
which aren't.
and I'm not finding fault with that, I know that. I've been involved, as you all know, most of you know, a very long time. And one of our problems consistently has been, let's do this, and it just leaves as, let's do a review, an annual review, with no mention of specificity, who's in charge of that, and many of the recommendations I made deal with some of the need of addressing that. Some of the others are a little slightly more substantive. Again, much of this is based on my prior and many years of experience at the board level, where proposals are made, and particularly when there have been transitions and changes at the board, at the headquarters itself, something is lost in the translation. So my need is we are very specific that staff shall issue a call for members who would like to be committee members. Nice idea. When are you going to do that? Who's going to do it? So what I did was I went through the entire report and I sent it to Matt, and I passed it on to the committee. And I think it just got lost in the shuffle of time. And
No, those changes are incorporated.
okay. But there were some that I looked and I couldn't find them.
It was all on transparency policy.
No, it's every single one. And I'll bring them up as we go through it. Again, for clarification, just for example, Wells Key, we have awarded Wells Key posthumously. It's not addressed there. As we're looking down the road, it needs to be incorporated into that description. So if that question arises, it will be clearly stipulated there. Maybe too many years when I cover legislation, it doesn't in the bill, it's open to massive reinterpretation. Our specificity kills us, lack thereof. So that's what I try to attack there.
So we brought it before delegates and resolutions. Do we have a motion on all of the other policies minus the ones you brought out?
Yeah.
So we can take those in a block and then.
Yeah, that was, that's right.
Do you want?
And I
Did you
have-
say what you want in the block?
Just
Just
correct.
words out.
Right, so
Yeah.
do you want to make the motion?
Yeah, and I can tell you which ones we did incorporate.
Yeah, well, we can do.
We need to go through what's in the block, not just what's out.
Yeah, so what is in the block that I propose we vote on first, most of the cosmetic changes are, correct. I'm moving that this board adopts a policy that includes the following. The ACE JMC policy, campaign guidelines, the convention bag sponsorship, the convention voting sponsorship, the discretionary spending policy, the EIJ sponsorship policy, the electronic voting policy, the investment policy, the non-media company conventions policy, the reimbursement guidelines, the policy regulating the release of LDF information that addresses the, one second. Bear with me here.
Okay, applicant information.
Correct. The sponsor disclosure policy, the third-party records policy, the whistleblower policy, and the work visa policy.
I'd like to second that.
Okay, wait, do we have first, Jennifer, do you have that list of policies?
I didn't get all of them.
I can email it to you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's a long list. So I would here read that, okay.
Yeah, I can have to read that.
Okay, wait a second. Okay. That's a large block.
If anyone of those, maybe this will make it easier. If anyone has an issue or has a question with
That was,
that,
that was gonna be my proposal.
I
That's
can
a
pull out one
large,
of them.
that's a large block to vote on at once, so perhaps, we'll do it, I'll keep an eye on the room, and I see your hand. Maybe you read them out slowly, if anyone would like to break them out, raise their hand. Andy, did you have a suggestion?
I was kind of agreeing with you, maybe we could pick out two.
Yeah, it's a lot, and this is what I'm saying, we could also group them together, maybe like convention sponsorships is one thing, I mean, there are several
Well,
around that.
it's
because
easier
this
to
sounds
do
like-
it, if you just want it on the list alphabetically.
Yeah, let's just do it.
I'm happy to.
But alphabetical, that doesn't make as much sense as we did things together that it goes.
Well, but that's how the document has
Right,
it.
it's
So
easier
it's
to find the
easier.
document.
Can we just go in the order that they?
The non-controversial ones will approve and then we'll get.
So if you guys want to do votes on each one, we can do that, it might be quicker than trying to figure out how to do this.
Further question, does anyone object to any of those policies? They're all cosmetic, I read the report. No one, if anyone has a problem, otherwise it's just vote on it.
Okay.
We trust you guys.
What we're gonna do, what I propose, you read the list slowly once, if anyone would like to break that policy out, discuss it separately, I just wanna make sure that we're not, these are very important, I wanna railroad through. My hunch is that everyone is okay with that block, but I don't know, so you read it slowly, I'll look at the room, if anyone wants to break it out, fine, we'll break it out. If not, we'll vote on this as a block, so, you wanna do that?
The first policy, the Accrediting Council on Education and Journalism and Mass Communication Selection Policy.
What?
Scroll down, scroll down. The campaign guidelines. The composition of national committees policy. The convention registration bag policy. The convention voting transparency policy. The discretionary spending policy. The EIJ sponsorship policy. The electronic voting policy.
Okay, I don't see it.
The investment policy. The the non-media company convention sponsorship policy. The reimbursement guidelines for board members and regional coordinators.
Matt,
Yes.
not sponsorship.
Yes.
And the government. Is it overly broad? I mentioned in an email, I think to somebody a few weeks ago. For instance, the U.S. Border Patrol sponsors professional bull riding. You know, it's an agency of the federal government, but, you know, they're popular in the Southwest. They go and ask for money and they give, $100,000 to stick their logo on everything. I mean, I can't imagine that the government would be.
Our recommendation is repeal that.
Repeal
So
it.
just,
Okay, okay, I'm sorry, okay. I misread
So the
that. I misread the
recommendation-
line, okay.
The recommendation is to repeal. Do you feel there's a need to discuss repealing or?
No, I just want to make sure that, I mean, that when we assess sponsors, we assess them. Yeah, okay, I'm sorry, I thought we were.
no, it's a good point. I'm glad you brought it up.
And
Matt, if you don't mind maybe just accommodating, I think there's people here in the audience who have expressed questions about our sponsorship policy. So if you could just let them know if they don't have it in front of them, what it is that we're doing here.
Yeah, that's fair. Let me, follow, because there are several sponsorship policies.
right, and they don't have it before them, and some say recommend with minor changes, and I can't see changes.
Yeah, so the EIJ sponsorship policy, we recommend maintaining without a change because that, something we agreed to with our partner, RTG&A. And so we didn't want to change that.
And I think everyone here probably knows this, but just to be certain, we are with RTD next year in 2020. So if we did make a change, we would have to go back and forth a few times perhaps.
And then the non-media company convention sponsorship policy is a policy that we think is outdated. We are recommending to repeal that.
In
Our-
as much as it's superseded by what we
Correct.
put in place
Correct.
in February.
That
And
was
then,
the 2006 policy, just for.
and then we have a sponsor disclosure policy. We recommend keeping unchanged to specify, because we have this policy we just talked about with our TDNA that regards EIJ, that the sponsor disclosure policy stays in place with the one change being the addition of 5 words that say that it applies to sponsors outside the national convention, meaning SBJ's national convention. So that is a pretty minor change. And that is the extent of the sponsorship policies. I mean, they really are pretty innocuous.
Did we get to the one?
No.
So we
So-
continue with the block and then we will go. So far,
So
everything
the
is.
last few are the third-party records policy, the whistleblower policy,
Okay.
and the work visa policy.
Okay, so, that is the block, and, I think Jennifer has that now.
I'll still email you.
We have a motion and a second, and I don't see any further discussion, so all those in favor say aye. Yay. I'm sorry, Deb, was that you? I couldn't hear you, was that an aye?
Aye, for me.
Okay, so, board members of the say aye. Okay, any nays, any abstentions? Okay, the motion is approved. Okay, so let's move along.
So the awards policy we can start with first, and
Do you want to give the page number for the benefit of those who are following along on the packet?
yeah, the awards policy is towards the top of the document. It's on page 2 of the document. Let's see where it is.
Page 7.
Thank you. Thanks, Eric. Page 70 on the agenda. And so basically, the only reason I broke this out is so we can have a discussion about it. It proposes a new policy because of the elimination of the executive committee. And what it essentially does is it empowers a lot of our existing committees to do some of our recommendations for some of our national awards. The Awards and Honors Committee, Freedom of Information Committee, Ethics Committee, the Journalism Education Committee. It also lays out a timeline for the Wills Memorial Key. And to that, Sue wants to explain, one of the things that we did discuss is winners, shall be in attendance, high honor, who won in person. In the past, the award has been given posthumously. So the discussion on the task force was, because we've done that before, we don't necessarily need to address it in the policy. It's happened before, but if you feel strongly about spelling it out, why don't you explain why you want to do that?
Again, I don't think you can be specific enough because history gets lost. We've seen it happen repeatedly here over the years. So my proposal was to revise the last line there to read, Wells Key honorees are required to be in attendance at the annual convention, period. However, the Wells Key may also be awarded posthumously.
I don't have a problem with that either. If any of the task force members want to speak up or here, I don't have a problem with that. That's fine.
Do any of the board members weren't on the task force?
So when we say they must be required to attend, there are issues with it.
Yes, happen.
Okay.
It is not.
So
Inside from prior years, yes, they have to be there.
So they have to be there or representative.
They have to be there.
Okay. So if a committee being there, then something happens. I mean,
We'll deal with that as a situation, type of thing.
okay.
But I think the rule has to be in place. What life happens.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's a fair point too, that obviously it's a.
It's a secret award, so they don't commit.
Then.
Well, that's true, yeah.
We round them up is the deal. We make sure they can be there, but tell them why. Because it's supposed to be.
Yeah, so they're keep their hands.
It's underhanded.
So if no one has anything else on that, it's just for clarification, so the language we'll read now, Wells Key honorees are required to be in attendance at the annual convention. However, the Wells Key may also be awarded posthumously.
The one thing though about required is because it is a secret, we're not actually telling them they must be there, we're just trying to wrap them up.
Right, and you don't have to specify that, I think.
We have the Wells Key should be, the committee has the Wells Key should be given to the person attending the convention. Perhaps instead of required, which is kind of odd to require something of someone who's not informed that they're required to do something. Maybe the Wells Key should be in attention, should be in attendance instead of
You could just
required.
add your second sentence.
Yeah,
If you want.
and just add is
Just add, however, the Wells Key may also be awarded posthumously. Are you okay with that?
You know, it's the funds they have, but
It is the responsibility of whoever makes the decision on the Wells Key, which has been the practice in the past, to make certain that person is there. Hence, it is required. It will not be awarded if they know that person may have to be there that year. And I can tell you, I've been known enough for them to know that that's had to be adjusted to accommodate that. In essence, it's been required. It has to be
well, should
That's
is
the way
more
it's
accurate.
That's the way it goes, Alex.
Should is more accurate in this case because it's difficult to require something of something.
Again, too many years of covering the legislature.
Is there a problem with just adding your final sentence on the phosphorus?
Well, most of it, the task force was okay with his language. So the board of justices English, the county English uses English.
You okay with that?
Yeah, that's fine.
There's one question though, what happens if the person, whoever decides who the honoree is gonna be, and that person intends to come, but then at the last minute, they don't show up?
That's what that was suggesting.
Right,
And that
but-
might happens, in which case you make, thus far, we've been fortunate enough.
But would the award then be given to someone differently at the last minute? You come up with a different candidate?
That one wouldn't, see, that is where it's tricky, where you're inviting someone, but you're not telling them it's a surprise
Right.
award. So it's not
I
really
think
a
if you
requirement,
use the-
because if they knew they were getting this award,
You
they
use
would know.
require, then you can't award it to some, so if that person doesn't show up, then there'll be no Wells Key.
So
And that-
maybe
What
it
this
should
means
go-
is you can't.
We think a message or something like that that's similar. in-
Well, like should is the best
I think should
language.
is the best. So are we saying that if we have the Wells Key, the award made, and we're ready to announce it, won't we do every other award and say when someone couldn't be here last minute, except on their behalf? In other words, they don't get a Wells key because at the very last minute their flight was canceled or their husband became ill, they don't get the Wells key, is that what you're saying? That seems very
I don't
harsh.
think that's very right.
I don't think that's what we're.
That's not the intention.
But required, that's what required means, it means you don't get the award if it's not there.
It
And they don't
should,
even know they're
the
getting an
intent is there,
award.
but add your language about posthumously, you get that.
I think should actually, in other words, the people giving the award do everything in their power to make sure that person is there. But we don't deny an
I just think
award.
there's so much pushback.
What about needs to, like?
Should is very strong in the English language. Strong, it's a strong little verb, it is. I mean, it's not as strong as must, and then it's not a requirement, but should is, I mean, I don't know, I think that your
Yeah,
language.
I guess my proposal, my suggestion would be we keep should, and then we add a second sentence about posthumously.
Shall is the same as must, I mean, good enough.
Shall, same. Mark is fine.
Should seems.
Should is. I mean, I think the sentences you have is fine, but just add something about posthumously.
My only concern would be that if it were awarded to someone who wasn't there, the last minute didn't show up, that person intended to be there, intended to give it to that person, at the very last minute, they don't show up, SBJ goes forward and awards it to that person without being there, and then someone raises a challenge by saying, well, your board policy said they were required to be there, they weren't there. What happens then?
Should.
Yes.
Yeah, I think should does,
Should
but if you want to make that, you could perhaps make that stronger, but
It's not worth that much time, or you can.
But we would add the posthumously, yes.
Yeah.
Because obviously.
I have a larger question on this whole thing. So I think this is a logical solution to the fact that we don't have an executive committee to look at all these awards. But I do wonder whether staff has the capacity to manage all the various awards in this way, right? Because before, everything went to the executive committee and then it was one meeting, everything was solved. So this is more working pieces and it does require more staff support to make that happen. So Jennifer's saying, yeah, we got it, but just want to acknowledge that this creates, new deadlines and new persons who have to be involved in the decision-making process. A little less streamlined.
And maybe the need for a coordinator, which doesn't need dealt with at this point. Maybe there is a need for a coordinator, a staff.
We do have a.
And we have an awards coordinator.
Yeah,
all the
we
time.
have we have a committee and we also have Matt Kinn is the staff person who does that.
Maybe I'll speak a little bit about this. I made this recommendation when I was, and the genesis of it is that we have an SBJ Awards and Honors Committee, which is universally misunderstood as having more authority than it does. And its entire role is to look at three concepts: SDX, MOE, and NUMER. What has never been clear to me is why that was in place. Why aren't some of these honors going before the honors committee? It just, I don't know. But what made sense to make that change here is because the executive committee is going away. It was a natural evolution. I mean, Patty's point is correct. So what's the alternative? The full board is now going to go through all of these. I mean, it's kind of getting away from the idea of being a strategic board. But the awards committee has the capacity to actually do these things because its work tends to be very concentrated for about 3-4 weeks, and then the rest of the year, people drift away. I don't think there's a whole lot of logistics involved. I mean, if you have to check that the executive committee has come up with the David Echelon Award, instead you have to check with the awards committee to come up with the David Echelon Award.
Well, I think this is a pretty elegant solution. For those of you who don't know, because these awards have been discussed by the executive committee before, so some of us have here been doing it for 2 or 3 years. Several of the awards do have a national committee that solicits and is for pretty judges, and that's the FOIA, the ethics, the education. What we're talking about here is essentially taking those board awards that didn't have a national committee assigned to it and assigning those 2 awards. That's basically the solution.
Any other discussion on the awards policy? If not, we can
don't see any hands.
I'll move it with the one change.
Okay, and we have a second. Okay, Lawrence, a second. Don't see any hands. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays, any abstentions? Aye. 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 Telephone with delay, okay.
And so then the next two policies we can take together is, one would be repealing the board meetings policy, which would be made obsolete and redundant by this new board transparency policy, which, as you'll see, has a lot to it. This was one of the things that came out of the discussions this year about board meetings and transparency and notification of when we were meeting and whether people would have a chance to talk and a seat at the table. And so what we created here is a policy that spells out timelines for when meetings can be held and how far in advance information needs to be shared with the public and with our members. And it's very thorough, as you can see. There's a lot of bullet points in there that lay out what we can and can't do and how we do it. And it doesn't only apply to meetings real quickly, but it also applies to records and communications. And Lauren, who took the lead on this, has her hand up.
I just wanted to address it for a moment. I think it's really important for our members in the room to know that we take your input very seriously. We heard you, and a lot of the people who are sitting at this table felt the same way. And that was how this policy came to be. So we really appreciate your input, and please continue to share with whoever is sitting at the table and all of the leaders at SPJ. And to me, this is just a very critical thing. I think this helps move us forward in a positive way, and it demonstrates that we are open with our members. It's important us to share information.
We need to move along on this. So how should we do this? Should we take one?
One actually, Ben Larson from the Chicago Pro Chapter that asked why the transparency policy is less specific in the reasons for going into executive session. He said rather go at general follow. It's a perfect fit, but just those
Less specific meaning.
In terms of listing employment with compensation. Typically, when we go into executive session, we do describe, we're discussing employment, compensation, we're discussing a legal contract, we're discussing a partner. We usually give.
This actually is language
Yeah.
that was in existing places. So it's nothing new. These are the reasons that in the past SPJ has cited. Because when we do executive session, we do and we should say why we're doing that, so our members know. So these kind of the main of reasons.
Okay, Ben? Yes.
I just generally, as I was scrolling through the packages now, I came across this. And it did appear to me that, like you said, these are generally regarded as, the old policy was generally regarded as being tenants of open meeting laws across the country. Three specific reasons why going into executive session as a reporter, having these is nice to have. It strikes me that the new policy does not enumerate them as the one that is recommended to be repealed does. So it seems that the new policy gets rid of the specificities unless they are listed somewhere else.
They should be there.
That's in there.
It's a much longer policy, so I'm scrolling
There it
through.
says-
Looking for it, but which paragraph do you see those under?
Yeah, the bulleted section, the new bulleted section reads, the board will account for circumstances where private discussion among leaders is necessary, similar to state open meeting laws.
Right, similar.
Typical examples. Well, it says typical exemptions that might allow meeting in executive session include personnel decisions, property or contract negotiations, certain award decisions, pending potential
But it's a typical
litigation.
rather than saying these are the reasons why you can do that. Now it says
I see what you're saying.
typically we might do it for this. but this
I
is
hear what you're saying. I think I have a suggestion.
Yeah.
Is it enough to require to give the reason? I think, now I was not on this committee, I appointed you to, but typically you use language like typical because you can't always account for what might happen in the future. These are the reasons I think we've always given. But you don't want to tie the hands of the future board if like a question comes up, a legal question that can't happen. One of these, what we could say is, they must give the reason. Where is this?
Well, it says the board will account for, so that you have to give the reason, that's what that stands
Yeah.
for.
Yeah.
You know,
So your question is, why does it say typically instead of?
Right, it seems more broad, and I rather like that there are specific reasons why.
Discipline, discipline, compensation.
No, I think he raises a valid point in the sense that the prior policy did say that these executive sessions are only rarely and under strict limits, and then it identifies the strict limitations. But I think the spirit, I don't think, I didn't read this as having necessarily a different spirit of the fact that they're gonna follow the open meeting laws and basically only do it in these rare circumstances.
Is there anything though that we might be leaving out? I mean, why would we create a problem for the board in the future? And just so people know, by the way, if there are any guests in the room, this is Mark Phelan, our legal counsel, and the next we will hear from Mark, we will hear from Bob Becker, a violence and I saw Andy has hand up. So Mark, is there anything we're leaving out on this list that could be problematic in future? I mean, I think
No,
it's a bit of a hedge in case we forgot something important.
The proposed language gives the wiggle room that you're suggesting. The existing language was tighter
Yeah.
and confined it. But I think the disclosure is required under both policies, both the new and the old policy. The disclosure is in the sense that the board has to inform the public as to why they're going into the executive session.
would there be a downside to restricting it or limiting it only to these
So,
categories?
Maybe I can address that.
Yeah.
Sure.
Because typically exemptions in FOIA laws and open meeting laws are discretionary. Okay, so there may be situations where you want to have an open discussion of the contract. You wouldn't want to set a requirement that if you're discussing a contract, it has to be closed. So you would like to keep it as flexible as possible. And then therefore give examples of what the types of things are that might justify a closure.
Does that make you see that differently or no?
I mean, I think it's not, I don't think the language would require you to go to executive session, but it's enumerated which are allowed to go to executive session. Does not necessarily require you to go to executive session.
You got something, Andy?
I can see Ben's point. I'm not sure I totally agree with it, though. I like the idea of not leaving it open-ended. But the problem is that if an example comes up that we did not foresee, it really is pretty legitimate. If we have enumerated it, we'll stop. I feel just that the transparency part of it, by announcing the general topic of what it is, allows people to be aware that we're doing something.
Yes.
I'd like to turn to a slightly different topic here, and that's the proposal that committee meetings also be held in public. So it says board, committee, and task force meetings should be accessible to everyone. Members of SPJ or the public should be allowed to monitor teleconference or video conference meetings held by these groups. Absolutely endorse that in spirit, but again, logistically, we have to make sure that committee meetings are established and announced, and do they have to abide by the 72 hours rule, et cetera, and who's going to be in charge of making sure that there's video conference or teleconference. Those draft that.
I'd say right there, that would be a problem if that were the staff, because it's
That's a
extremely
lot of
late.
it.
It's extremely
Because we have a lot of
time consuming, we have to hire.
We have a
additional staff.
lot of committees
No,
doing a lot of, Okay, thank you.
So the reason I wanted that in there is I believe that if there's a member who's interested in something a particular committee or task force is doing, that they have the right to sit in and listen in that meeting. But it's also written in such a way that the onus is on the member to contact the chair to let them know they want to do that. And anybody can do a conference call, freeconference.com, there's ways to do it for free. So we're not
But the
talking about
onus
a
is on
Zoom
the-
webinar every single time, but it's on the member who is interested to reach out to the chair to express that interest to make it available. And it's written down, that's what's written down.
There's that sense, says anyone interested should contact the committee or task force chair in advance to get information to listen. It does put the onus on the interested party.
Exactly.
And also the notice requirement of the policy states applies to board meetings, not necessarily committee meetings.
All right. We've laid that out there.
Absolutely.
No, I did understand. So, yeah, thank you.
With regard to the advance notice, this, for the most part, addresses our needs, but there has been an occasion where we had to have an emergency meeting in under 24 hours, definitely within that time. So I had proposed an addition to the section that says regular board meeting agendas will be posted at least 72 hours in advance. I would add, my proposal was to add to the end of it. However, if there's an emergency board meeting with less than 24 hours to provide notice, this is to accommodate the need to let people know. Information shall be sent out and posted to social media ASAP. It's wide, it's broad, but it at least makes certain that local chapter members who are out there won't be caught by surprise, going, wait, what's this all about? I mean, it's the time constraints are considerable. There's no question about that when nothing comes up in the emergency. But I still think we owe it to the members to find a way to at least get it out there. In fact, social media is the best way, the quickest way to do that. And I just wanted to make certain that it's there to cover our backsides and provide transparency to members.
Yeah, and as the task force chair, I don't have a problem with that in there.
I want to call on Jennifer, because she does manage our social media, which incidentally goes to many more people than just our members. So Jennifer, your thoughts on that?
That was the point I wanted to make. We haven't really used social media as a major way to communicate to members, because we do have 70,000 followers on Twitter. Most of our followers there don't care about minutes and meetings and all that stuff. So I mean, I would rather figure out a different way to communicate.
Yeah,
with members.
this is,
Do you see what I'm trying to do?
Yeah.
We're just trying to,
Well, we could, so suggestion, we could change the language to say, however, if there's an emergency board meeting with less than 24 hours to provide notice, information shall be sent out as soon as possible.
through the quickest means
I think-
possible.
Yeah, I think that makes more sense without being
We
too
would do that
prescriptive.
anyway.
Incidentally, we don't know where the technology is going to take us. I mean, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, we not discussing social media. And also, it's both too broad and too narrow. There's the fact that we have 70,000 followers, sadly far fewer members. But there's also the fact that most people don't look at social media. I mean, the dirty little secret is that almost no one will see your tweet if you do it that way. There are other ways to reach members that they're more likely to actually see it if you target a specific group. Yes, Joe?
By adding the but at the end, does that open the door for a few board to say, well, I think it's an emergency meeting. We'll make this an emergency meeting.
Well, that was,
I'm just saying,
I do want us to- the board
right,
will-
to say that it was an emergency, so we didn't tell you, so we didn't get to you.
No, I think of an emergency is fairly clear when you have an extremely
Makes sense.
limited time.
Calls it an emergency. And determines-
so that was, candidly, that was my reason for leaving it out. Because the intention is to give as much notice as possible and to not have to deal with this 24-hour.
And if you don't want to deal with 72 hours, just say it's an emergency meeting.
Right.
Right.
I think this has come up once or twice in the 5 years I've been on the board. It's very rare, and it's invoked only when there's something we really have to deal with in less than 24 hours, and you can't wait 3 days.
But again, in the spirit of transparency and the concerns that have been raised repeatedly by the chapters, I think it's incumbent upon us to at least make the effort to say, on a rare occasion, and it is rare, let's face it, it's rare. But I think it's fair enough to say, if a need arises and the board has to have something and it's under that minimum required time, I think it's a fair thing to say to you all as members, we're hands are tied, but we'll do the best we can to get that word to you as soon as we possibly can. I think that's a responsible thing. You know, you'd like to give the board the benefit of the doubt that they'll be a responsible thing. And I think it's the right thing. I think the members should have confidence in the board will do that. Will we be called out on occasionally? I hope not. If it happens, then that person should be rightfully dealt with.
Okay, are people,
Well, I guess I would add some more language to this because we know that more words, we're journalists. However, in rare situations, if there is an emergency board, something like that, to let people know that we're not going to abuse this. I think that's a valid point.
yeah, okay. Do we have that edit?
So it would,
Jennifer, do you
read-
have that edit?
Okay. So final language, however, in rare situations, if there is an emergency board meeting with less than 24 hours to provide notice, information shall be sent out by the quickest means possible.
Now, in the interest of time, can we both, with one vote, approve the board of transparency policy and say, and repeal the board, the 1999 board meetings policy? No, you have to make a motion.
I move that we repeal the board meetings policy and adopt the transparency policy for inclusion in this policy manual with the change that we just laid out.
Second.
I heard another voice over there, was that Andy? Yes, Andy, I think Andy beat me there. Okay. We have a motion on the table, I think we've had discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any nays?
Aye.
Any nays, any abstentions?
Okay, just two left. One is the conflict of interest policy, and then we'll leave the two executive director policies, which are short and sweet, to the end. But the conflict of interest policy, and Andy can drive this briefly in a second, but this was a long conflict of interest policy that kind of, you know, was like, that we want to just get down to brass tacks and say, this is when you need to disclose. Here are some specific examples, but they're not limited to having someone close to you who's in or seeking to be in a business or financial relationship with SPJ, voting on a proposal that could financially benefit or otherwise reward the person voting. So it uses the same concepts. It crystallizes it more in the task force's opinion. It also, because regional coordinators are on board, there are some disclosure deadlines for them called out specifically because annually this disclosure conflict of interest statement comes to the board, and there is a natural point to have this conversation to make these disclosures. That won't apply to the regional coordinators, but obviously the concept still applies to them. And I guess the last point I would make before turning it over to Andy is the conflict of interest policy statement that everybody else signed stays the same. It's the short policy itself that we propose making much more direct. Andy, you want to add anything?
What I want to add is we had multiple places where we talked about conflicts, but it was a very strange presentation. It was like a long, rambling essay on how to be the best person to be. It's just, and some of the advice in there was a little weird. So we just tightened it up and tried to make it all purpose. You could try to pick up some of the loopholes. What is a family member? What is a close friend? And all that. We gave it our best try.
And we did run this by our attorney, Mark. Did you want to add anything about
The conflict of interest issue?
the
No,
conflict of interest policy?
yeah. I think it adheres to generally accepted conflict of interest policies for other boards and organizations. It's consistent with that.
So to start the discussion, I'll move approval.
Motion process, so, aren't we had, okay, we've already had a discussion, but, okay, we have a motion
Move that we
for
approve-
the conflict of interest policy.
yeah, move we approve our conflict of interest policy.
We can have 89. Was that Andy?
Yes.
Okay, second? Second. Lauren, okay. Further discussion? Wow. Not a lot of discussion on the conflict of interest policy. Okay. I mean, these are updates as we know we have existing, so. Was there anything else about the changes made? Okay. We have a motion on the table. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Aye. Any abstentions? Okay, motion is approved. Moving along to the grant amount.
Sue actually has one.
My apologies, I have my notes.
Wait, is this about the conflict of interest?
No, this is national committees.
Okay.
This is fairly quick. This goes to put an idea out there to do something without specificity. So this goes to the national committees policy, where it says, to help groom new leadership and increase the effectiveness of its advocacy work, SPJ shall invite once a year all members in good standing to apply to serve on SPJ's national committee. There's no mention of when, there's no mention of who, there's no mention of how. So my proposal was, and you can blow this up, but I'm just trying to put some specificity to it. My proposal is every June, trying to keep in mind when our convention is, when the committees are formed. Every June, staff shall send out a notice to the membership of a list of national committees and ask that members apply by 2 weeks prior to the annual convention. And, you can budget one way or the other. But that way, as new committees are being formed, they'll have a list to begin to work with. And that's it. It is simple as that. It just provides that specificity, because this can easily get shuffled events that are going on.
Where are you proposing that? I'm sorry.
National committees.
It's on page 74 in the board packet.
That's correct.
No, I haven't.
So there's one small, this is policy from 2007, there's already one small amendment which was approved. This is an additional amendment that we should vote on again. The previous amendment has been adopted. And do you want to repeat that language, Susan?
Okay, it reads, every June, staff shall send out a notice to the membership with a list of national committees and ask that members apply by 2 weeks prior to the annual convention, period.
Okay, so we have any just,
Just two questions. Is staff able to,
I mean, it is a busy
Do that.
time because that is the SDX convention. That's the only thing I have when you are very specific in these and you don't consider, we haven't actually discussed this with the staff.
Well, all I'm saying is it says SPJ shall invite. Who? Who is this, who's handling that?
Well, I mean, it could be the president could delegate it to someone.
And
It
it
will
will get lost
delegate it
out.
to the staff.
It's the best.
And right around the SDX convention, I could just.
No. The question goes out in June.
Right, which is when there is prepared.
It's a simple procedural matter.
Who collects the responses?
I don't know if that,
I think that's one of those that can be worked out. I would suggest going to the existing committee chairs and let them reach out. Take the work off the staff. Simply, you're the central collection point. Somebody on staff would essentially have it on the calendar, send the notice out. And that's what I'm trying to get at. It has to be a calendar item, or else it will get lost.
Okay.
should be a national committee chair?
Yeah, I mean, I prefer
Rather
not to
staff.
put extra work on the staff right at SD.
It's gotta be written down somewhere. That's why.
Is that relevant? Okay, good.
I think, so, tell me if I'm wrong, you're proposing this because you don't trust SBJ.
I'm doing it because I've seen too many things fall through the cracks.
So-
Good intentions that just got lost.
And I think in light of our conversation this morning, I don't know that the best way to get SBJ to do things is to make more detailed proposals. I think the way to get a more strategic board to do something is to simply hold their feet to the fire. So I'll be office board, I won't have anything to do, I will help you next year make a list of all the crap we want this board to do. And we can hold their feet to the fire like Jonathan Bates group has, like some of the people in this room are doing. To me, the best way to get a board, an elected board to do something is having people that elect them say, hey, this is your policy. It allows you to do whatever you want to, if you haven't done it at all, what the hell's going on?
Then I would, and we could say every June, SPJ, you can go. But again, give a time,
You
have a
can put
time mark.
time, but maybe don't indicate the staff, because there may be
That's
some
fine.
years when the staff does it, or maybe some years when the president assigns someone else to
That's
do
okay.
it. Maybe we have another period where we're understaffed, so, I think the time is a good thing. So where would you put in June?
Every June, SPJ shall send out.
Okay, that sounds great. Okay, any further discussion on the composition of national committees? Again, we've already approved this with one change, we're just approving the second time with that change, okay? We do make a motion, you made a
I
suggestion.
move that we, adopt those change in a specific time.
And I'll second that. Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstentions? Okay, motion is reapproved.
So really quickly, the last two, and I was just gonna include these in our, omnibus motion at the outset, but you can talk to Alex, she again called my attention to the fact that this policy applies to the foundation and to, the board. And so these are the two policies related to our executive director, evaluation, and the hiring policy. And, literally, they are in the hiring policy. The only change is to change the language of SDX Foundation to SPJ Foundation. The executive director evaluation policy, there was just some tightening of the language. So nothing in spirit or kind of content changes other than SPJ Foundation and SDX Foundation. So I would move approval of both of these and then add to that motion that we ask SPJ Foundation to approve it as well.
We refer it to the foundation, and we have the president and vice president here, so they will hear that we are referring it to them for the board's consideration. It does require the approval of both boards to change a joint policy.
What page you got?
Sorry.
What page?
78.
So that would be my motion. And Erwin, have you looked at that? Do you have any thoughts on those two? What page, it's on page 78 of the board packet.
Is the deputy director evaluation policy or hiring policy?
Correct, both of those, yeah.
Yeah, no, I didn't see.
So that would be my motion.
Is this something that if passed here, you could add it to your agenda tomorrow? I think it would be a fairly quick agenda item, and then we have passage within the agenda. Okay. I can't. Okay, I couldn't see. Okay, is that okay, Erwin? Can you talk about that tomorrow?
I don't think it's necessary.
Okay.
So. I'm sorry, what I was saying is I don't think it's necessary, and then I'll mention it at our board meeting tomorrow. I don't think it's necessary for us to adopt. The society is in charge of hiring and evaluating executives.
It's a joint policy. Bob was actually advising me on this.
It is a joint policy, but I mean, it is the SPJ policy to bring the foundation into the process legally. It couldn't, through the bylaws, bring them into it.
So effectively, if they don't have a problem with our changes, they don't need to vote. Okay, but they need to be aware and they can raise an issue that have a problem with the change. Okay, that's all we need to know.
And then I just move approval of those two
Okay,
policies.
so we have one motion, second, Lauren, okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oh, I'm sorry, more discussion. Yes.
Okay, again, this goes back to problems that we've had in the past. I propose that slight revision, line going, the evaluation committee shall share its findings with the SPJ and SPJ Foundation boards. My preference would be to add at least 1 week before the spring board meetings. And then the boards may recommend that the SPJ Board of Directors search for a new executive director. Again, that's specificity, because over the years, that is, frankly, many times been presented to us at the board meeting, which doesn't give us adequate time to really study. So I'm trying to nail some requirements in.
What happens if that annual review doesn't coincide with those meetings?
See, this year you did, but some years it'll be way off.
It's when,
Is it, or you want them to wait until?
well, it says here that the evaluation shall share its findings. Well, findings should be presented so that the board can have a chance to digest it, at least before the meeting. There has been somewhat problematic.
Well, we send this separately, for example, this very sentence separately. from. We work on it together. Yeah, Bob?
Yeah, it just seems to me, Sue, one of the issues in structuring here, you're looking at it into the old calendar. And I think under the new system, there isn't necessarily, board meetings aren't gonna happen exactly the same time. And there may be more of them. So any one of them could be.
But this addresses a very specific time period. And so I'm just saying, when that meeting is held, the report should be presented in advance of the meeting, so it's not, this is.
But we don't know the calendar, both of the hiring or the board meetings. For example, it may make sense to do this in December, not in April. That's maybe getting a little too.
Oh, I see what you're saying,
prescriptive.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, well, what, you want us to wait 4 months beyond the person's annual? I see a lot of hands, I'm sorry. Michael Savino, then Andy, and then
Well, can we
Michael
take
Perez.
Sue's suggestion to leave it a little
Just
more
say, take the word
flexible
spring out
to,
and just say.
I'm sorry, can you let Michael talk?
can we be a little more flexible in the wording so that it's 1 week before the meeting, closest to the
Sure.
annual anniversary, or the first meeting after, whatever
Sure.
we think is more appropriate.
I think
but
the first
still-
meeting after makes sense, because the closest one might be before the annual.
Sure.
review, might not be
So it still sets a deadline, but it
Right.
makes it more flexible to
Yeah,
the calendars.
Yeah, the closest meeting after the annual review, I think that works. Okay, Andy, did that
My
answer your
suggestion
question?
was just instead of thinking about when before something can happen, we make it when after. So after it's done, within however many weeks that we share.
I understand what Sue's trying to get at, there may be times when we had a vote on a raise for an executive director without even receiving the documentation, and that's not fiscally responsible for the board. I think Tameo's suggestion is fine, and I'm sure these guys will look at us like, well, this is too much integral detail, but.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, me, really? You have to understand that, especially as far as, again, is we just haven't had an executive director, but even when we had a good one, the issue was, I remember one year, we were just handed the review, first of all, we were told we couldn't even see it, then we were told we could read it, but we couldn't take it with us, because we couldn't trust it with us, and then we were told to vote on a hefty raise. That actually hurts the executive director, doesn't help the executive director. So, I don't know the words, I don't know, ask Leah if she's gonna charge us, but I would love to find out there's gotta be, this is something that other organizations must be dealing with. I can't imagine it's not a best practice to figure this stuff out the way we were doing it. Gotta think wrong. So, I don't know, Savino suggested sounds good, but these are the kind of granular issues that actually you do need to resolve for future boards, especially smaller boards.
But these are standard operating procedures we're working on, so I mean, that's really the basis of this work. Can you say again what, Michael Savino?
Just, I mean, 1 week before the meeting, immediately after the annual review.
The soonest meeting after the annual
You're a
review.
genius.
Yeah, I like that, okay, Jennifer, did you get that? Okay. Any further discussion on the executive director policies? Hiring and review, okay? Hands, yeah. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays, any abstentions, okay? Motion is approved.
We're done, thank you guys.
Hey, I want to give a huge thank you to this team here. This is the biggest undertaking I think we've ever had in terms of policy review. One thing we noticed in this term, the board has passed many policies in individual meetings over decades. Some of these were probably before we had a website. Some of them were on the website, many of them were not. We'd have to hunt around in the early minutes, go back to previous presidents. They teaching past that policy. So this is huge, and this will all be what will be fine now, so.
Actually, I have one additional point, though. Thank you very much for the work. It is significant, but there are many deadlines now introduced into our life as a board. And if I may ask for an addendum or a glossary page that lists the deadlines, kind of calendars out what's expected as a shortcut to having to not, is that
I'll put that
possible?
together. Yeah,
Thank you
sure.
very much. Appreciate that.
Great idea.
Very good. Yes, Laura.
So I know we're about to move into another long discussion, so I just wanted to take a moment for us to remember John Ensslin. I was one of 4 people at this table who were at this table when John was president. And I feel very lucky to have served with him. He was an amazing leader, very inspiring, connected with people in just incredible ways, brought out the best in all of us, made an effort to find out what was important to us and have us work on what mattered to us. And we were all very, very lucky to have him. And I don't know protocol, I know we're working on a resolution, but I don't know if this board ever adjourns in the memory of someone, if we can adjourn.
I thought we were gonna talk about that at the adjournment after.
I just don't know, I just wanna make sure that John's not somebody, talking about John is not somebody that should be rushed, and I know at the end of the meeting, that's true. And so I don't know if any of the others who served with him wanted to say anything, but,
Is there anyone else?
he was the best.
Yeah. Right.
There is a motion draft, like,
Yeah,
you know, so maybe after this meeting, if you guys are interested in taking a gander at it and signing up with it, that'd be cool.
That would be the best way.
Yeah, I've circulated
Sure.
it to the chapters he was on, but certainly anyone else who wants to add or co-sponsor to it.
Right. I'm sure you sent it to Denver and
Yeah,
New Jersey.
and,
I would also include New York too, if you
Okay.
haven't, because he was at our events all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, so.
Yeah, I know
Yeah.
in Connecticut too, you reached out to us 4 times.
Yeah.
So it's certainly.
And he was National President of the Year, I was the New York chapter president, he would come in and do our events all the time. He was very big on mentoring leaders coming up the ladder, so very important. Okay, so yeah, the best is for people to talk to you after this, we wanna put something in that resolution. Okay. Anything further? Okay. We are running a little behind, so I'll say there are 2 more extremely important presentations. What we just went through, and that had a lot of action items in it, that was about cleaning up our existing policies and setting us on a good path going into the new, smaller board in our transition year. We have 2 more, which are really looking at the future, a long-term strategic plan task force, and then our executive consultants from Talbot. I told them they would each have about 30 to 40 minutes, but as we are running short, I'm gonna have to limit it for 11 now to a half an hour each. I think some of you do want to get to the super session at noon. But what we can do perhaps is if people still have questions for either Talbot or Victor Hernandez, our task force chair, maybe we can stay afternoon and ask those questions one-on-one. Just so we can both get people out of here but answer their questions. So the next item on our agenda is the long-term strategic planning task force.
Okay.
Come on.
I just need a couple minutes to plug in.
Oh, okay. You've been doing that during the big warm-up intro.
It's a tough act to
That
follow.
drum roll.
It's a tough act. I don't know if I can follow up on an hour and a half of policy review. Given as it was, I will try to keep up. Thank you.
I was thinking of giving people a 5-minute break now, but I was afraid they might all scatter. It looks like those people who needed one just took the 5-minute break, so you have time to get set up. And I might, just to see if I can get some fresh coffee. Yeah, when I thought. Oh, sure.
Something so long, I looked So it'd be a class. It's like the little, yeah. Is it silver? Silver.
6 minutes to warm up? Yes.
But it won't be clear. Well, it might be gold because it looks like the back. It could be gold or silver.
I think it's starting to arrive. Yeah. It's like dial-up.
Yeah.
It's a dial-up checker. It's not high speed.
14.4.
Our AOL screens wouldn't way go.
Take 5 minutes. We never figured out why. We just had to get it in quick. Everything was perfectly hooked up.
I don't, are we breaking or are we going?
People left.
I think it was a, undeclared break. Did it.
I will,
I will talk to you all later.
Well, I haven't played it for space.
Yeah.
You know, we run a few minutes after. Well, the session is out. But,
Since we can treat this is planting season.
yes, one thing we should say
We've
first
got
off is the
foundation
people.
tomorrow.
Yeah, we've got foundation tomorrow.
There's a town hall Saturday.
Saturday.
And then-
Town hall tomorrow. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, are you doing this again in the morning or something? But that's Tuesday will be, yeah, new.
Yeah, as appetite exists.
You're gonna get this presentation down.
Okay. Oh, there's mountains. Wait till a few people come down. I want to take, Matt, you are there. I want to make sure these Matt out of here. Maybe we should get started. Matt, you want to come back to the front of the room? I think we should get started even though a few people have not returned yet. How do you find theirs? Let's get started, yeah, because I don't want to keep too much on time. And to tell people who are here, who may not know, he's doing a longer presentation Saturday, so the town hall. So you don't get all of your questions answered here, they'll tell you where to go.
Morning, everyone. My name is Victor Hernandez. I've been the chair of the long-term strategic planning task force for the last 4.5 months. It's been a wonderful team of contributors towards this effort. This kicked off back in April at the board meeting in Indianapolis, where the committee was introduced and the long road ahead was launched into. I want to provide a high-level look at much of the efforts in terms of the exploration and the listening. This will be a continued conversation here in San Antonio. We're literally on the books on several meetings every morning through Sunday, whether it's here, Foundation tomorrow, we have a town hall that's highlighted here. On Saturday at 9 a.m., we would encourage everybody to come back to the board meeting part on Sunday. For those that aren't intimately familiar with the task force, the mandate and the thrust of which is pretty direct in that we've been asked to really chart recommendations and potential smart paths forward through research and developing what a new strategic plan looks like for the society, with an emphasis this year on phase 1 in terms of that listening and the understanding what the challenges are that really are taking the most priority and the most attention, rightly so. And phase 2, which will be next calendar year, but really kicks in post EIJ 19, is really about compiling those recommendations into the comprehensive report. We'll talk about briefly. And we intended to begin broad, thinking about and expanding and looking at not only what are the challenges taking place within EIJ, but also across our industry, what other similar organizations are, what those challenges, where they're seizing opportunities, what is trending within their membership growth and decline, and what those lessons look like back into SBJ. The search efforts to this point, the research efforts to this point have largely consisted of a membership survey. We have the town hall listening session, which I just mentioned, is Saturday morning. There are focus groups that will be activated later this month. More information coming on that. And we've tried to operate with a great deal of transparency and openness by posting our FAQs, what the goals are, the status and the timeline of the project, the member survey, and then again, where we're going in terms of the big report as well as the focus groups in between. All of this information largely resides on sbj.org on a special info page. This is the dream team here. These folks have been terrific voices and contributors. We've had a divide and conquer approach in terms of divvying up roles and responsibilities, and whether it be running with the member survey, whether it be focusing on some key slices of the research and exploration, and also a lot of the run-up and prep work ahead of EIJ. This is, as it stands today, and has been the case for the last 4.5 months. Many of these folks are here with us. April, of course, representing the foundation board, and Kimberly Chin, who is a younger person, because we wanted to have either a student or a recent graduate that could provide important perspective. The rest of us of a certain vintage, stripes. We are not having always those similar thoughts, and so we want to be as inclusive and mindful of membership and the organization moving forward. Speaking of moving forward, Matt will join the team as the new chair after San Antonio, and the executive director, TBD, which we've got a lot of questions and updates around already today. The expectation is that person will be a key voice and person of influence within this work. And Patty, I think you maybe wanted to expand on that, or did I cover that?
Covered it. Obviously, the executive director will be invited immediately to join this conversation. We really feel strongly that any strategic plan would be foolhardy if it doesn't have the participation of the key staff person. It would all be for naught if we make recommendations that can't actually be implemented, are not advised, and so on and so forth. So
we're going to keep the pace moving quickly, but I do have to note that these folks are incredible. And so while I'm up here holding the remote and doing most of the driving, I want Yvette, Patty, Mike, Alex, Jennifer has been amazing. I want you all to jump in spots, and I want to maybe ask for you to talk about some of your contributions throughout. So I'm very fortunate to be able to help lead this team. In 2019, the phase one efforts, again, it's really been around the research, the feedback, understanding what are the core issues, and then providing those timely updates. In 2020 going forward, we're going to switch out the chair. I've got some things going on back in my newsroom in Seattle, where I've only recently arrived at, and some of my attention is needed there, and Matt is going to be a very capable person to lead the charge. So I'm excited, and we'll continue to sort of be in the background and contribute. But the work only grows more intense in 2020 around the efforts of these focus groups, the culmination of this comprehensive report, and those recommendations, what that looks like back to the board and members in April. There are some key touch points. It's not just about today's conversation, which I'm briefly providing a high-level snapshot on project overview and the timeline, light touch availability on some of the survey highlights, only because we're short on time. And then, of course, if there were time, but all of us on the committee I know would be available and happy to field more questions and ideas and other contributions that you all may have. Included in the board packet, however, in addition to this conversation now, is a much deeper dive around the survey highlights, not just the data points and the visuals, but also more responses shared through the open-ended questions, as well as the timeline. And so you have almost a 50-page presentation in the board packet itself that Mike and Yvette worked very diligently to put together. And again, I would refer everyone back to spj.org for the info page. Billy is working on it as we speak. I'm sure he promises actually shortly after this meeting, we're going to update the FAQs to include the entire member result from the survey. And so you can see that in its entirety, and also that aforementioned near 50-page presentation. So there's lots of different ways to access this information and us today and going forward. We started this project in May after the Indy board meeting in April, and we really focused on just identifying what are the chief questions, what are the challenges that SPJ as an organization is trying to solve for. I won't go through all of these because again, the information is available, but we came up with 11 that we started to really try and wrap hearts and minds around and understand where these roads could take us, whether it's through talking with members, utilizing the survey, doing the due diligence to understand what's occurring within other similar organizations in the space, and really becoming more aware of how we begin to address these challenges or these opportunities, however we wish to flip that. And so, as we talk about the areas for impact, what the some 65 plus other journalism, media, professional associations are doing, lessons learned and that could be applied toward that, where when our members leave SPJ, when they opt to no longer renew, why is that the case? Why do they continue that relationship with other associations? And what can we better be for? What is the value that we can provide back in to membership? And so these were really the sort of driving principles and questions that led this sort of stage one research and exploration. I just referenced what some of the other associations are doing. And so we've been looking, and studying, we've been having conversations with ourselves and with people that are leading many of these institutions. And it's important for us to understand what it is that SPJ offers that others do similar, or that others are doing very well that we are ignoring or dismissive, or the perception and the optics are that we are just not delivering on those capacities. Certainly with the realization that many of us belong to more than one professional association. No one at our committee level has been suggesting, hey, pick one, pick your favorite, go that route, and that's the badge you wear for life. Many of us here in the room, I know, belong to a handful, and some more. And so these were some of the operating principles. So in terms of the member survey, which went out at the beginning of August, or late July, beginning of August. So summer period, not ideal. People are sort of in vacation mode and out and busy and such. But we emailed our members. So almost 5,600. We got about just under 10% responses back, which, like you say, that's okay. That's acceptable.
Yeah, for an external survey, you're going to say 10% to 15% response rate. If it's internal, if it was a board survey or a staff survey, if you're looking at 30 to 40% response rate.
We wanted to go with about 20 to 25 questions, not too many, not too cumbersome. We ended up with 34 because we just kept jamming in questions we felt were really pertinent to the journey that we were all signed up for. About a near 50-50 split, male versus female. You see there where most of the respondents came from. Most of them have a print professional background, followed by online, other being freelance and other areas of public relations and such, magazine, TV, and radio behind. The responses skewed older, 2/3 of which were 50 years plus, and the most common was age 61 to 70. And through all the thick and thin of what we read, we did want to call up that there was a kind of shining data point, and that 68% of respondents said they were very likely to renew SBJ even through the sort of tumultuous period of time, or the period. So that's good. That's some good bit of news there. We want to underscore the things we're sharing in the next few slides and in the packets obviously are not speaking for the entirety of SBJ members, right? This is a small sample, 10%. So when we say respondents were for or against something, felt strongly or not so strongly, this is a of the bigger pie. Again, because we have the sort of notation that the people who responded back to us skewed more, up there in age and different locations. It's not, what I'm saying is the margin error may be off a little bit, right? So some of the high-level key findings, and please, Alex, give me the signal if we're running dangerously close on time, but let me get through as much of this as we can. What we heard in terms of some of the big themes, and we asked a lot of questions. Of the 34, we asked things that hadn't been discussed in years. We had things that hadn't been discussed ever. We had things that get discussed all the time. So we wanted to mix it up in a way that we had a better gauge as to what those 550 people were thinking and what was important. And so we heard from respondents that told us things like, hey, I'm not interested in seeing SBJ headquarters move to one of the big media capitals, right? They do not support a name change. Those two questions we received back were close. And the data is available online and in the packets. This wasn't like a 90-10 split. It was, Mike, you check me on this, but it was like 55-45, I think, sort of in those areas. But that was where the majority were, that they didn't feel supportive toward those things. They do support, however, increasing lobbying efforts at the national and the state levels. I think that was a little bit more stretched out in terms of the gap in support of. They were not in favor of increasing member dues, and we got a series of inconsistent responses back on questions on education and visual training. When we asked what the key areas that they would like to see SBJ focused on, the three most common responses were ethics, journalism training, and a work around open government. In terms of impact opportunities where SBJ could be providing even greater value across the industry and toward members, what we heard was it's about advocacy for journalism, the code of ethics, that SBJ could and should and does provide industry relevance and camaraderie, and also the efforts toward media literacy. So just briefly touching on the actual data, we asked the question, what do you value most from SBJ? And down the line, we have access to First Amendment, ethics, FOIA, legal defense as the top draw, followed by industry association and relevance, networking, career opportunities, journalism training, and award opportunities. Other also was there inside the packets. You can see what those responses look like in terms of what the variety, some were valid, some didn't make a whole lot of sense in terms of the framework here, but this gives you a snapshot of where the respondents felt like they were getting the most value. What would you expect SBJ to be known for over the next decade? And this was close, right? In terms of ethics, journalism training, and open government, they were all very close to each other, followed by career resources and diversity. So all important areas, all active areas for SBJ, but we also see that SBJ is active in a lot of other areas. And so if we talk about narrowing down the specificity of what it is we're delivering, are these down as where the greatest opportunities seem to persist with those who responded. Most impactful areas and programs for SBJ to focus on, again, we have some similar themes around advocacy for journalism, code of ethics, relevance, media literacy, digital training, student programs, OES, awards and contests, and then other. Where is SBJ lacking regarding education toward its members? Webinars and online resources were the most popular responses here. If we go beyond the numbers, because the data is interesting, but it's also somewhat limiting in terms of the context, we began to review what the open-ended questions provided for us, what respondents told us about SBJ education and digital training, is that there's a need for digital tools training and online trainings. We're not doing enough webinars. We're not providing online resources in a way that is the hands-on skill sets and support that so many are craving. We heard that SBJ is not currently meeting their needs in this area. In-person trainings are important, but not as important, not as convenient as online trainings. And on another question, respondents ranked journalism training number 2 on what the org should be known for in the next decade, but they ranked it 4th on what they value most in the organization. So a little bit of conflict on that one. Members expressed their opinions by answering several open-ended questions, and while many see SBJ doing positive things, we heard a lot of concerns. We heard a lot of frustration. One commenter summed up what many shared with us, that right now SBJ is not welcoming, it's impersonal, it's low profile, no public position on important issues. We heard that several times. Some of the common themes as we looked at hundreds and hundreds of these comments, that members who want more and better open communication with the board and with headquarters. They indicate the board infighting takes SBJ away from its mission. They want more chapter support, more interaction amongst the chapters, and they want more local programming and turnkey programming for chapters, more resources, more of the digital training. Members responding want training that goes well beyond just Facebook and Google. They want to get it back to basics in terms of what is the breakthrough best practices and cutting edge around reporting and storytelling. A lot of this was suggested should be achieved through webinars. They want training that prepares them for their next jobs. They want better employment assistance. We know that the industry is grappling with this. And they want more lobbying and advocacy for journalism. While we think we are providing impact there, clearly the perception by many of the respondents is it just isn't enough. And similar with diversity, and Rebecca and all the great work that's going on, all of these efforts behind the scenes to grow diversity and make it a key cornerstone of what SBJ is doing is not enough. And that many of the feedback that we received was around SBJ is not doing enough. So it's not just, it wasn't all negative. It was that we did get some positives. And so to balance that out a bit, what did respondents say they liked most about SBJ in terms of the open-ended questions? These are some of the dozens of responses we got. These are just a few. And so you can read these here. In the interest of time, I'll just point out this last one here at the bottom that they give us credit for just existing, right? The SBJ simply exists in today's difficult media environment. They're giving us points on that, which, sure, I mean, that's not a bad thing, but that's sort of where things are at. But there is value, and a lot of which was tied to First Amendment advocacy, open government work that SBJ is really founded in. But it often came back on these open-ended comments around the need for better communication. And you can read here, it's bureaucracy, poor communication among members, also that a lot of people can't express in 30 seconds what SBJ provides members, potential members. We need to promote ourselves and SBJ better. Someone else wrote, we need more information on national governance issues. I don't have time to wander through blogs, etc. Just send me the info. I desire communication that stimulates action and involvement. And someone else wrote, SBJ should not rely on SBJ leads and social media for communicating to its members. Finally, we had one commenter that seemed to sort of wrap things up in a bow that was very reflective of what a lot of the frustration and the concerns were that we received through this member survey. This person said, I'm not sure what the role of SBJ is supposed to be. I'm supposed to connect. And I'm not aware of whatever free speech, journalism, fourth estate advocacy is going on. It's a female professional radio journalist, age 41 to 50 years. In terms of where we go from here, I touched on it at the top, but we're wrapping up sort of phase one, the exploration, the research. The theme here for the 8 of us, will soon be 10 in San Antonio, is to listen, is to share, is to provide what these efforts have been looking like. This is a group of people that we've gotten together for at least an hour every 2 weeks and exchanged 1,000 documents between us. Thank you, Google Docs. But we still have a lot of work to do. And so that will continue on an ongoing basis around the research findings, making the survey data available today for everyone online, continuing to have those open channels where people can receive information. There is a plan that within the next 2 weeks on the info page, we will announce groups where through online portals, similar to what we did with the governance task force a couple of years ago now, where we will allow members, we are going to encourage members to sign up for these focus groups so that we can talk to them about not only some of the things we've shared today, but other ideas and other concerns and challenges, and those opportunities to take us to get to a more healthier place. And the commitment is that we have that available, where we have multiple days within the next 2 weeks after leaving San Antonio, and then again, looking ahead to Indianapolis in the spring, where the full report's made available.
Oh, just.
For those of you that weren't with us when this formally was launched in Indianapolis last April, I know many of the room were, but we spent a lot of time, we had a great hour and a half, brainstorm, and it was really a meaty discussion around where do we go to seek these answers, and are we asking the right questions, and what are the other organizations doing that we're not, et cetera. How do we grow? How do we fulfill these obligations and give the true value back for our members? And we used an analogy, right? I sort of talked about, in my mind, SPJ is this Swiss Army knife. We serve 40 plus different functions. We have resources at different stages of your journalism career. As a student or as someone who has retired long ago, there are a lot of different outlets and opportunities for you to connect and receive value. But when you see the other organizations that work with precision around a single, purpose, a scalpel, and we're the Swiss Army knife. We have a million blades and things and utility, but it's hard to find that one you need in a pinch versus going to that one community that does 1 or 3 things extremely well, and that's what they're known for. That was a great discussion. We tried to not sort of bake that in because the recommendations are still forthcoming in April, but I think that the groundwork for us to understand what the challenges are, what these key questions are, a better read on what members are feeling in terms of not receiving, a lack of, not getting the proper support, frustrations around communication, all of these things, we sort of needed to get those pieces in order, and then we figure out what are we? What are we in the toolbox? What do we need to be known for, and where do we provide that great value?
Okay.
Sure.
I have a question. It's interesting that, and not surprising, that the respondents skewed over. Because the folks who've been here longer are more apt, and you know this, you guys know the research, they're going to respond, it's like voting in an election. What concerns me is one of their top findings is do more about basic journalism. And there's kind of, to me, it's like, why are older members trying to talk about basic journalism? What concerns me, and this is not in any way intended to be a criticism, it's a frustration, is the younger members, who are largely not represented here, getting to them, because I include myself in that older group, it's the younger, it's the 19 to 40, frankly, crew. And their voices, I think, are very different. And what draws that even more painfully to mind is I see many of my former students, and I'm sure it's brought up in the task force, who look at and I will use the NABJ conference as a huge way to be involved and engaged and participating. It is a buzz. It is a thing to do, and that is the demographic that we need to suck back in here. With all due respect to my own older demographic, there's a disconnect there for me.
You know, what's interesting too, and I can speak to that. Is we look through the quantitative, my failure pane, I wanted to see more of a 50-50 split there. But what was interesting when we went through the quantitative answers, I expected to see, okay, should we move to New York? All the people under 50 ranking it 9, and all of the 50 over crowd ranking it 1. I did not on any question. The scores you saw up there, 4, 5, whatever they scored, it was across the board when it broke it down by age. It was across the board when you broke it down by sex. It was, that's what was really interesting to me. So, sometimes I think too with the older members, maybe they want to come back and pick up new skills. That's one of the big things we're seeing, because in the trainings I go out to, I'm seeing my groups I'm training getting older and older and older. I just did one at the University of Nebraska, get more alums and students there.
That's not.
Yeah.
But it's perfectly logical because the students and the recent grads have the skills. I mean, it's a retraining.
But
is what we're doing.
to your point, you're exactly right. I think one of our fundamental challenges here with this project and going forward is number 9. These are back to our guiding questions. How can we effectively accelerate SPJ's evolution without alienating some member groups? So how do we re-engineer DNA? How do we become faster, younger, slicker, more relevant?
More diverse.
We're modern. We're more all of the things we want to be.
Cool factor that maybe you don't use word, but that is a real thing.
How do we become that without losing the people who help that we're supporting?
And by the way, we talked about the fact that there were not more young members in this, and even though what Mike said was true, I think once we get to the focus groups, we need to bring, because then it's not just what you think is important, but more solutions based.
But I
And
think
that's where you might get some real differences based.
But
on
I think a lot is there that we need to take a look at. So Mike and I Mike handles a lot of the data, and I kind of jumped into the comments and the questions. And even though that might seem a little unusual, there's still, I think, this kind of very laser pointed as far as training is concerned, that we need to go online. And that is something that you will see younger people say it as well. So yeah, they want training, but they want to be able to access it. They want webinars. They want to have some kind of easier way to get to it. I think, with any survey, obviously we're going to have some issues, and we always try to take the information that we have and see if we can apply it to the larger, But I think when we're looking at that, we need to be mindful of that and be mindful of the fact that, when we're going forward, let's make sure that we get that younger group. But I think we can look at that. I think we can look at the fact that diversity is still on the table as an issue. I think we can look at the fact that, we need to be online. And I think the bigger thing, even though the woman who said it was 41 to 50, I think if you ask someone who's 25 to 30, they say the same thing. Who is SPJ? I think we can apply a lot of what we see to what we need.
Yeah, I would say, are the cross tabs available somewhere that we could have access to? Because I would just love to see how the answers changed as age went down or as distance from.
Right. Mike, we have that available?
Jennifer, you have all
Yeah,
is it going up to the website?
Yeah, that'd be out
there. Yeah, you'll have everything.
Research.
So it's visible or?
It will.
In about an hour.
Oh,
Billy's
okay.
get-
And also, and I read this a week after we closed the study, or the survey. If you go to reach a younger audience in the future, text them the survey.
Yeah.
The higher response rate for people 40 and under, if you text them.
But the other thing is, survey's not as cool as interactive things. I'm hoping that once we get to focus groups, that we might get more younger people. I
Yeah,
mean,
that was-
survey is not as much fun.
I was gonna say, also, like, I mean, yeah, how are we reaching the younger audience? Obviously we have email, but they're maybe not checking it as much just because email isn't as much of a way to communicate as it used to be.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I know talking with my cohorts and trying to get young people involved in SBJ in the first place is how do we get a presence in newsrooms? I hear from some of my older colleagues and older members of our chapter that it used to be a thing that chapters would use, sometimes big newsrooms would even pay for memberships or partially pay for memberships and just get more presence in newsrooms. They saw value in making sure that their staff knew about SBJ and were members, and that's not a thing anymore.
Yeah.
So, even though that's not a thing, if you've been a member of SBJ, you're probably more inclined to stay. Whereas when I talk to people who are just out of college trying to get them to sign up, their first thing is, well, I don't know if I can afford it because I'm getting paid crap. And they don't see a value in it because they've never been in it in the first place, especially when it comes from a school that doesn't have a campus chapter.
I'm running sure it's not a test.
One thing with focus groups is if you're gonna wanna reach young people, you're gonna need to do them times. I swing shift Tuesday through Saturday. So doing things on Saturday is not really an option, doing things in the evening, not really an option, doing things at 8 AM, not really an option. So I think you're gonna have to get creative with times and how you do that, because if you have something at 7 on Wednesday, well, I'm editing.
Yeah.
Can't go.
May I do a quick wrap up?
Yes.
Because I know we need to save time
Yeah.
for the next. So I want to thank Victor for leading this effort and
Oh,
the other
okay.
members of the task force for participating. We want to move with all due speed on this, right? We can't continue to have this conversation month after month after month. We have to put something on paper and work with our new executive director and our staff to implement it. So we will have the opportunity for these two focus groups. We will have a time for a more full conversation here at EIJ on Saturday morning, 9 to 10, and that's in the Lone Star A room. We'll have a full hour where Victor will give this presentation again. We'll have more time for conversation and weighing in. We'll go back to taking notes and so forth. But in the end, all of this work is in service to trying to create a pretty tightly worded functional document that guides our activities, our focus over the next 2 to 3 year period. It's a to-do list, but it's a deeply informed to-do list. Here's the things we're going to do right now, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to look at this thing that we haven't had time to explore. So we're going to continue to dig in. Also keep in mind that the document will be a living, breathing document that the board will come back to every probably once a year. Are these still our relevant priorities? Have we finished that? Have we completed that task or that have we decided that's no longer really who we are? And so on and so forth. And that document could inform our public-facing communication. So all of that, thank you for the time on the agenda.
Yeah, and actually I didn't realize it was gonna be a summation. I thought you were making a point. There was one point I did want to make that was not made by the other people, which is, I think part of the issue, we talk about this every year, is better communicating what we do. I thought the most interesting comment, where did Victor go? Oh, there you are, sorry. By the 40-something, was just, I'm not aware of public advocacy. She doesn't think we don't do it. And I think a lot of members are aware that we do something, but they're not certain what. For example, this has done more advocacy than I can really issue dozens of statements. National leaders have done dozens of interviews. I summarized some of them in the packet, but it's not getting out there. I mean, when I speak with other groups, sometimes they're more aware of what I've done than SBJ members. So, I just think that's something that we need to look at with this. Not only what do our members want us to do and what should we be doing, but how do we better communicate with members? That's what I take away from that. So, on that point, we do need to move along. I should say we now have less than half an hour, so we may go over a bit. If people want to go, I don't know, us to indicate when it's noon. If you have something you need to get to, you want to go to the super session or something. We're about 20 minutes, but I want to give you at least half an hour and time for questions. So we can either indicate when it's noon or we'll figure it out. Okay. Take it away.
Well, I met a large number of you already, but for those who are new in the room, my name is Heather Walensky. I am with Talbot Talent, and this is Leah York, who owns the company. We have been working on finding the next executive director and also conducting an organizational assessment to really under what are the needs and priorities within the organization that this new executive director will be able to address. So I wanted to share some findings from the organizational assessment, and then at the end I'll give an update on the search because I'm sure there's some interest in that as well. Our findings are largely in 3 categories: strategy and leadership, human resources, and operations. And then there's one roadmap that the executive director can prioritize. With the goals of the project, I'm not going to read all of the bullets in the interest of time, but basically we looked at human resource operations, we looked at financial processes and policies and metrics that are captured in the organization, and then we also factored in technology and other organizational and functional processes. So we have a lot of recommendations and findings in this area. To go through the process, interviewed every staff member. So we had some of the conversations there. We did an employee survey. So there was a staff survey that went out. And then I've been on site and sitting in on staff meetings and observing and gathering feedback that way as well. So it's a pretty robust approach that we took to make sure that we're really being thorough. With the key themes, overall staff really appreciate the opportunity to work in this field around advocacy for journalism. They really believe in the future of SPJ. And that being said, it's a tough climate today working at SPJ because there is obviously not an executive director that is permanent in place. Alex has been serving as interim and balancing board president duties at the same time. So, we recognize that a lot of the challenges are not because of staff limitations per se, but more around leadership and needing a strong strategy in place, and we'll get into that. So we just heard about the strategic plan. So this is right in lockstep with that. We really want to make sure that, of course, the executive director is involved in that process whenever that individual comes on board, and it was encouraging to hear that that is absolutely the plan. We recommend trying to complete the strategic plan in the first half of 2020. One of the questions in the survey asked staff what their top challenges, what they felt the top challenges for SPJ is, and this all came out in my one conversations. The lack of a strategic plan was definitely a top challenge, along with decreased relevancy, board relation issues, and lack of emerging leaders throughout the organization. Again, staff have confidence in the organization, but really are lacking that leadership and that longer term strategy to be able to align their roles and responsibilities and best serve their members. With leadership and board relations, we recommend placing an interim executive director because of the board president transition. And so we recommend having some daily leadership until that executive director is found and they are in place. And with the hiring of the executive director, making sure that there's a strong onboarding period, that there's also a session or training for our new board members, and also facilitating that assimilation between the new executive director and our new board. So there's a lot of changes that are coming about here. And also making sure that there's continuous investment in board president and the executive director. There's an annual conference that we listed here as kind of a best practice, the ASAE CEO Symposium. But we recommend that annually there's an opportunity for the executive director and the board presidents to go away to a retreat, focus on long-term strategy issues, and building that strong partnership and relationship. The point I want to make before advancing, the with the lack of an executive director, the board has been paying more attention to the day-to-day operations. It shines a spotlight on what's happening within the staff. The majority of staff say that they would like to see the board focus more on strategic priorities and less on the day-to-day operations. We're hopeful that with a strong new executive director in place, that the executive director and the board will be able to clarify what are those roles and boundaries, and how can information best flow to the staff and from the staff back to the board. And the staff would like to see more support and encouragement from the board. They don't feel that their expertise and work is valued, so improving and strengthening that relationship is important as well. Around human resources, there's been a lot of change with hiring new members or new staff. There's also going to be a new system that is implemented. Blackbaud is the system, so if you're not familiar, this will help strengthen and streamline membership and financial processes. So this system will also dramatically change roles and how the membership manager does her job and how the operations manager does her job. So it's going to be important for the executive director to look across the board roles and really write clear job descriptions, have very clear roles and responsibilities laid out, and making sure that moving forward, standard operating procedures are documented, that there's clear outline of how to perform certain tasks. There's been a lot of knowledge that left the organization in the last year, and we have staff today that have picked up where they could and really jumped in and have become assimilated with the organization, and want to make sure that their knowledge is being captured, processed, or documented, so that we don't face that issue again of historical knowledge walking out the door. With the findings, also want to mention that staff are not always brought into projects or decisions at the right time, and while the staff has been working very hard, very capably to launch EIJ, there is opportunity to help the staff out of their silos a bit. With the HR functional processes, there's, with a small organization, not a dedicated HR leader. So there's some opportunity here to improve. With the executive director coming in, we really want to see a strong onboarding program for that executive director, but then also for any other new members or new employees that are hired at SPJ. We also want to make sure that there are clear performance expectations laid out for every role. Right now, that's pretty much driven by the individual and what their scope of responsibility looks like today, but without a strong leader in place, performance expectations have not been clearly laid out with goals to achieve. So recommend that is one of the top priorities, along with revising the performance management process. SPJ follows a very traditional process, which is not unusual, to do a year-end review. And so we're recommending that the organization move to more of a manager as coach philosophy, have more frequent conversations around performance and development, and not just save those conversations for a year-end performance review. Also recommend looking at the form that is used to capture data and overhauling that process as well, and that tool. So within operations, this somewhat connects to the point I made earlier about staff not always feeling like they're being brought into conversations at the right time. I found that we really need a strong project management capability within the organization. It doesn't necessarily mean hiring or creating a job as a project manager, but building that skill set and that capability within the organization. We need to have someone with demonstrated project management experience to take charge of large projects, and similar to this big conference that is put in place. Someone that oversees the picture and helps keep everything moving seamlessly. Staff felt that sometimes there's poor planning or they're being asked to do things last minute and it's a drain on their time. It also makes it very difficult for them to balance responding to urgent issues that come about versus the day-to-day roles and responsibilities that they have. So putting more long-term planning in place and having more of that lead time and foresight so that projects are managed a little more efficiently. With the cloud-based software that I mentioned here, there are some software programs that are free tools that will help provide that visibility and that transparency. With the finance and other operations findings, because Blackbaud is being implemented, there's already a lot of work in the finance department to document processes, to improve the budgeting process. They just hired a staff accountant. There was a need for a full-time bookkeeper, and so they found a very talented staff accountant to join the team, and this will help ease the burden for the individuals in the controller CFO role. And we also made some recommendations to streamline the payroll process, which have already been implemented. Basically, those were some changes to reduce any potential for human error with paychecks, and so those have been implemented. With the development and fundraising, the lack of a strategic plan at this point has made it a little bit difficult, along with the lack of an executive director, to get really focused on development and fundraising with clear goals and metrics. So we have a preliminary fundraising plan that's been created. There's opportunity to secure more grants while working and finding additional partners. And so I know the strategic planning committee, the conversations that come out of that committee will also inform development at SPJ. For the year one roadmap, just listing out in terms of a cadence of how the executive director might proceed with implementing some of our recommendations. It's not an exhaustive list of everything that was in here. There's some more tactical day-to-day recommendations that we have for the executive director as well, that we won't go into here because they're very operational day-to-day items. But in terms of the big picture and some of the more strategic items, in month 1 through 3, that will be a critical time for the executive director to onboard and to start building that project management capability, really clarifying roles and responsibilities. Blackbaud is expected to be implemented here in the next couple of months. So if that is on schedule and successfully implemented, that work will be able to begin with the new executive director in the role in the 1 to 3 month time frame. Of course, the strategic planning is called out as well. And then months 4 through 6, as the strategic planning work is getting to a point where there's clearer direction for the team, they're able to then establish some business metrics that build off of that strategic plan. We put that in months 4 through 6. All of this is contingent on when in the calendar year this executive director is joining SPJ, and I'll give you an update on that here next. And then months 7 through 9 and 10 to 12 are continuing strengthening the leadership within the organization, and then of course at the end of the 10 to 12 month time frame, evaluating overall staff performance and capabilities if the performance review process does not get changed to a more frequent cadence. So, quick update on the executive director search. The little red icon is where we are today. And this process kicked off in June. So we needed to make sure that we were aligning the job profile of what SPJ would be looking for in their candidate to the needs of the organization. So we actually underwent some of the and survey before jumping in and going out and recruiting. So There's been some fact finding and data gathering, and that took place in June through July. And then there was a position profile that was created that summarizes the characteristics of what SPJ would be looking for. The recruiting began, so Talbot Talent uses a very targeted approach where they're going out and finding the right people. So to get to that point, starting by building that recruitment strategy, identifying the top organizations and types of member-based associations, characteristics and experience that the executive director should have. They are compiling that search strategy to be able to find those people, and then building a candidate list of those ideal candidates to reach out to. We've also had a large number of people who have learned about the position send in their information and their resume, and so referrals are definitely appreciated through this process. And the committee, currently there's a committee that is leading the search, and so as candidates are identified, they're thoroughly vetted through a process within Talbot Talent. They have some initial phone interviews, they have several behavioral interviews before they're even presented to the committee. And the purpose is to make sure that when they are to the point where a candidate is being presented to the committee, then they are definitely a strong contender, a strong candidate for the organization. Then Peggy will, who is chairing the committee, will have a preliminary conversation with the individual, and then decide if that candidate will be presented to the committee. And in our experience, it is rare that a candidate does not move past that point once they're having that conversation with the committee chair. The committee will then make a decision about the candidate and whether to present that candidate to the broader board. After the final candidate is selected, an offer will be accepted. It's pretty common, especially with this level of candidate, to give a 30-day notice at their place of employment. So that's why we have the executive director's first day potentially in December. We're striving to have an offer accepted in November if they need to give that 30-day notice. So that is the overall timeline.
Very timely news. Oh, wait, you have one more slide?
Yep.
Oh, I'm
2 minutes.
sorry.
I can do it in 2 minutes. For the ideal candidate, this is a snapshot of what came out of the position profile. So on the far left, the like to have, those are the required characteristics that the person needs to have. Bachelor's degree, membership-based organizations, that's also another way of saying experience with associations, and advocacy, people management. The journalism requirement is that they have a passion for journalism advocacy. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are a journalist, but that they have a passion for that work, because they will be, of course, leading an organization that is heavily dedicated. And then they may also have an advanced degree or a certification. There's a CAE certification, for example, and so they may have additional honors there. And then along with managing people managers, so again, managing within a hierarchy, not just a flat organization. So that would be a nice to have. And then around best attributes, these are some of the leadership qualities that are very important in this executive director. There's going to be a lot of transformational change. There's, of course, moving from a large board to a smaller board. So we're looking for an executive director who has these leadership qualities and can help take SPJ and to the future as the strategic plan is being finalized and executed on. And then for the examples, this is examples of experience that we want them to have. And so these are very specific, concrete examples of where they've actually done this work, not just that they know how to do the work philosophically, but we ask very targeted behavioral interview questions to make sure that they've actually led an organizational transformation, not just that on paper they know how to do it and know a process, but we want them to actually have done it. We want them to show how they've made an impact through advocacy work. And then operational design, designing out the operations within an organization, given the number of recommendations we have around roles, responsibilities, and process improvement. I think that's the last one. So, yeah.
Okay, well, we are right at time. Don't know if people want to ask some questions now, or if people need to go as it is noon. We go for a few more minutes. Do people have questions? Or do we want?
Stay a few minutes
We
too.
could stay a few minutes afterwards. We could also adjourn the meeting as this is the last item on our agenda. And then people can stay and talk more informally. Are people okay with that? Okay. Before we go, I do want to mention that Michael Sabina, you emailed around joint incidents.
Yeah,
The
you've
resolution.
already responded, but anybody who wants to respond to their own.
Did that go to the board? I don't know if everybody in the room would have gotten it.
That went to the board.
So the non-board members won't have seen it. So for the non-board members in the room, if you want to, just communicate with Michael Sabina about the resolution for joint incident. Further comments, questions? Okay. And do we have a vote? Oh, right? Yes.
Who's not on this board anymore? Well, you guys are on the board, so thank those guys for everything that they have to deal with.
That's coming, man. We didn't forget about them. It's just not right now.
At their last meeting. Okay, whenever
Oh,
you're ready.
yes, we are. Well, we're all coming to the business meeting.
Oh, okay. Well, there you
Right,
go.
right. We have, yeah.
Sorry.
And do come to the final business meeting, right? 'Cause we have- Yes, Lauren.
I would like to move that we adjourn and that we have John on.
Okay. Do we have a second? Sorry. Was that Andy? Okay, yes. Good? Good? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nays, abstentions, okay, the meeting is adjourned. It's a wrap.
Stop this, Jennifer?
Okay.